You know what almost nobody understands about the people who walk away from work decades before everyone else? It usually has very little to do with money. The numbers matter, of course, but sit across from someone who retired at 35 or 40, and you'll find the spreadsheet was never the real engine. Something in them decided long before the bank account caught up that the standard deal, trade your best 40 years for a comfortable end, simply wasn't one they were willing to accept. And here's the psychological paradox sitting right at the center of this. The very mindset that lets someone escape the race early, the discipline to deny themselves, to plan obsessively, to think in decades while everyone else thinks in paychecks, is the same mindset that can quietly leave them anxious, isolated, and unsure of who they are once the work is gone. Today, we're going to explore the psychology of people who retire 20 years early. What's actually happening in their mind that lets them break a script almost everyone else follows? Why this pattern develops, and what it really reveals about who they are. Let's start with what researchers actually call this. Behavioral economists and psychologists studying early retirees refer to the core trait as delayed discounting, or more precisely, a low discount rate. In plain terms, it's the brain's unusual ability to value a future reward almost as much as a present one. Research out of Cornell and the University of Cambridge has consistently shown that people who retire radically early aren't simply earning more than everyone around them. In many cases, they earn the same or less. What sets them apart is a single cognitive skill. They can feel the weight of their future self as vividly as their present one. To most brains, the person you'll be in 20 years is a stranger. To theirs, that future person is real, and they protect them. The difference isn't the income, it's whose comfort the mind is actually optimizing for. Neurologically, this comes down to a structure you've probably heard of, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of long-term planning, impulse control, and self-projection. In early retirees, this region tends to stay firmly in command precisely in the moments most people surrender to impulse. There's also the ventral striatum, the brain's reward and craving center, the part that lights up at the new car, the upgrade, the thing you don't need but want right now. In most people, the striatum wins these small battles constantly, and each tiny surrender quietly costs them a piece of their future. In early retirees, the prefrontal cortex keeps a steady hand on that craving. The desire still registers fully, sharply, but it doesn't get to make the decision. The result is a mind that can hold a want in one hand and a 30-year plan in the other, and choose the plan again and again without it feeling like deprivation. What's fascinating is that this pattern almost never begins in a finance book or a budgeting app. For a large number of these people, the wiring is laid down in childhood, often in environments where security felt fragile or conditional. When a child grows up watching money cause stress at the dinner table, or in a home where stability could vanish without warning, the young nervous system learns a very logical rule. Build a wall, never be caught exposed. If you can stockpile enough safety, maybe nothing can hurt you again. The drive to retire early in this light isn't just ambition or frugality. It's an adaptation, a very intelligent nervous system turning money into armor and freedom into a kind of permanent escape route. The person racing to retire at 40 was very often a child who learned early that depending on anything outside themselves felt dangerous. Now, here's something worth pausing on. Not all early retirement comes from the same place, and the difference matters more than almost anything else about it. Psychologists generally separate it into two distinct types. The first is freedom-driven independence. The person isn't running from work, they're running toward a life. They've done the inner work to know what they want their days to hold, and money is simply the tool that buys those days back. This version, when balanced, is one of the healthiest relationships with money a human being can have. It's linked to genuine contentment, strong relationships, and a quiet sense of authorship over one's own life. The second type is avoidance-driven escape, a more restless pattern where the goal isn't a richer life, but the absence of obligation, where retirement is less a destination than a flight from anxiety. This is where the gift starts to cost them. In a hoarding instinct that never feels like enough, in relationships strained by years of relentless self-denial, in the strange emptiness that arrives the morning after they finally win, when the structure they built their identity around simply disappears. The tricky thing is that most early retirees live somewhere between the two, A healthy pursuit of freedom can slide almost invisibly into compulsive escape. And because the discipline looks so admirable, because saving and planning are the most praised financial virtues there are, it can be genuinely difficult to notice when you've crossed from building a life into merely fleeing one. Financial psychologists describe this as the enough illusion. The mind keeps believing that one more milestone, one more cushion, one more year will finally deliver the feeling of safety. But for a brain wired by early insecurity, the target keeps moving. The number that was supposed to mean safe arrives, and somehow it doesn't feel like safety. It just resets the goalpost. Only the internal motive tells you whether someone is building freedom or running from fear. And this is where dopamine enters the picture. Your brain releases dopamine not at the moment of arrival, but in the pursuit of a goal, in the progress, the climbing graph, the net worth ticking upward. So for someone chasing early retirement, the act of saving and watching the number grow becomes its own chemical reward. The brain learns to crave the accumulation itself. This is why telling an aggressive saver to just spend a little and enjoy it is neurologically naive. You're not asking them to relax. You're asking them to give up a reward their brain has been chasing for years. The steady, addictive hit of watching the wall get higher. Spending doesn't feel like joy to them. It feels like loss. So what does this whole pattern actually reveal about a person? Here's what the research suggests, and it might not be what you'd expect. A study published in the Journal of Economic Psychology found that people with the strongest capacity for delayed gratification also scored significantly higher on measures of self-continuity, a vivid, stable sense of connection to their own future and past selves. They tend to be, on average, more reflective, more intentional, more resistant to the social pressure that pulls everyone else toward the next purchase and the next upgrade. The very engine that lets them ignore the lifestyle everyone around them is buying is the same engine that lets them think clearly about what actually matters to them. These are often the people who seem strangely immune to trends, status, and the quiet panic of keeping up, because they decided long ago that their life would be measured by something other than the next thing. But independence without a sense of belonging is its own kind of poverty, and that's the tension these people live inside. They can save almost anything. They can wait, deny, and plan further into the future than nearly anyone they know. And yet the one thing money was supposed to buy, peace, often stays just out of reach, because the fear that built the wall doesn't retire when they do. Because here's the quiet truth the psychology keeps returning to. Financial freedom and inner freedom are not the same freedom. One is built by controlling the future. The other is built by trusting the present. And many early retirees spend their whole lives mastering the first while never touching the second. Financial therapists who work with these clients often focus not on changing the saving, but on changing what the saving is for. The goal isn't to make someone spend recklessly or abandon their plan. It's to help them pursue freedom from a place of intention instead of a place of fear. One framework they use teaches people to separate the action from the dread driving it, to notice the urge to accumulate without automatically obeying it. Instead of, I need more, or I won't be safe, the reframe becomes, I have built real security, and I get to decide what it's for. It's a subtle shift, but a genuinely powerful one. One keeps the old fear in charge of a grown adult's life. The other hands the wheel back to the person who actually earned the freedom. And for someone who has spent decades unable to feel that they have enough, that fraction of distance can be the difference between a free life and a richly funded cage. What all of this points to is something that reaches far beyond money. The drive to retire 20 years early is not a character flaw, and it's not simple greed or laziness. It is, at its core, a remarkably disciplined mind that learned to build safety in a world that once felt unstable. The challenge isn't to kill that discipline. The discipline is a gift. It buys back years of a person's one and only life. The challenge is to teach that mind, gently and with patience, that the wall was always meant to protect a life, not replace one. That security was never the destination. It was only ever supposed to be the door. And maybe that's the most human thing about all of this. We tend to envy the people who escape the race without ever asking what taught them to run so hard. The freedom we admire on the outside was often forged by something fearful on the inside. Understanding that doesn't take the achievement away, it just lets the person finally use it for what they wanted all along. And sometimes the bravest thing someone who retired early will ever do is learn that they were always allowed to stop saving for the future and start living in it. Because real wealth was never just about buying back your time. It was always about knowing what it's for,